I am the general manager of the Garden City Co-op, and what an interesting year to give a report on. I thought about the culture of your Garden City Co-op, and I was emailed this the other day, and I thought, boy, this kind of fits who we are. It says, 2 of the greatest qualities to have in life are patience and wisdom. This year we felt like that old farm dog, and I'll tell you, there was a bunch of stinkers in our bowl too. And we didn't have, in many opportunities, much to do but sit and wait and watch and plan about how to deal with them. So let's talk about the first thing. Dr. Barnaby talked about the competitive issues in the grain business. One thing that I want to give some clarity to is the Garden City Co-op is 51st biggest grain company in the U.S. when categorized by grain storage, which sounds like kind of a big deal. And if the only elevator that you see, if you're in the shadow of the Garden City Co-op, it might appear that the Garden City Co-op has a lot of market presence and can really swing a big stick. Garden City Co-op, as a percent of Kansas grain production, has struggled to get to 2.5%. So let me assure you that this market is very competitive, that there is no opportunity for price fixing, and it's challenging for us to try and figure out how to maximize that impact and make sure we do the best job of marketing your grain when we only control just such a small portion of Kansas. Kansas makes a lot of grain. A lot of other states do as well. This was my 14th annual meeting, and I think without fail, I have showed you some kind of chart about how much money we spend. And we spend on your behalf. And it's a bunch. Every year when I add that up, it scares me about half to death. I can't imagine what it does to Michael Walton from CoBank. But if you look, in the last 5 years, we have spent $42 million in property, plant, and equipment and other capital assets. Now that's a lot of money. And we have made, this board has made some tough decisions, and past board members have been involved in that. How do you raise that much money? What do you choose to do? What do you choose to get rid of? How do you deploy that level of assets to make sure that the members of this co-op have what they need? We've been able to do that with, beginning this year, about $17 million in term debt, and we make about $4 million a year term debt payments. So we're down $4 million, and we will, over the next 3 years, continue to make about $4 million a year payments. And it's got us in a working capital crunch, but I want you to understand that that is self-imposed by the board and management to make sure that we can get this debt paid down as quickly as is reasonable and be prepared for the next challenge. So a lot of it in the last 14 years, in the last 13 years, the message of my meeting or my presentation has been, we're building, we're getting ready, we're preparing. It's a tough place out here. We've got to continue to invest more. Agriculture's changing. And so we have been getting ready, and we continue to do that this year. But I can report to you today that this year we found out if we were ready. So let's just review some numbers. Well, let me think back. So before I get to that, how would you evaluate a co-op? There's a big stack of money up there, but let me tell you, to build something like Lowe and the other facilities that we have, it takes a lot more money. And we continue to spend money, and we continue to build storage, and we continue to build chemical sheds and anhydrous plants. And we continue to figure out how to raise enough money to do that. And we build and we build and we build. And in the last 2 years, we've piled more grain than we ever have before. It's obviously not enough. So how do you evaluate your co-op? Is it a pile of money up front? Is it a return on investment? Are you passive investors in a publicly traded stock company? I would argue that the only way that you can determine the return on your investment in the co-op is what has your experience been as a customer. Here's what our staff did. From Ken and the grain marketers doing this in cooperation with Wind River and some other grain companies, and then Toby's entire group of operations managers throughout the elevators, they performed a heroic event. There's 5 years worth of history about how much grain we ship, how much wheat do we ship after harvest to prepare for fall harvest. And shipping 3 million bushel of wheat in July, August, and September is no small feat. It stretches us every year to do that. But it was obvious this June that that was not going to be enough. And so to the people that made this happen, I want to say thank you on behalf of all the farmers represented in the room, that over 10 million bushel was gone. And Jeff made mention of the fact that our grain inventory going into fall harvest was as low as it's ever been. And that was a fact from Ken Jameson. Ken's pretty old. He's been here a long time. He's got a great memory. And so if you're lowest on grain inventory that Ken Jameson's ever seen, you're pretty low on grain inventory. Is that right, Ken? So let's talk about what these harvests have been like. That chart goes back to 1995. It is all of the grain taken in by Garden City Co-op, Sullivan Grain, and the Dighton Co-op before they were combined. The black line is all of the grain per calendar year. The orange line is the storage that was available to those entities to handle that crop. And so most of you in the room will remember the experience you had in 98 and 99 when there were semis leaving the state of Kansas and going to broke down middle of nowhere elevators all over eastern Colorado just trying to find a place to dump. That was a horrible harvest. It was a great harvest, but the experience for farmers was horrible. And so that prompted the board of the Garden City Co-op to take on an expansion at Lowe, Friend, and Pierceville to try and prepare for the next one. And we were better prepared for the next one. The board made the right decision. And those of you that remember the 2007, 8, and 9 harvest, when we almost had physical altercations between drivers from outbound trucks and farmers at Lowe, at Dighton, that was another great harvest. But from a customer experience standpoint, that was a bad day. We struggled mightily, and those harvests were not particularly profitable because we had to move that much grain out. And again, your co-op board answered that call and built storage. And so you see a continual line going up. But if you look at what happened in 2015 and 2016, I hope that gives some context to what the employees of your co-op were able to do. And I won't say that we handled these 3 record crops in a row seamlessly, but I hope that we would all agree that it was better than the 98, 99, and 2008 and 9 experience. And so the struggle begins, will it rain? Will this trend continue on? Do we have to go back down and dip and look like 2002 and 2007? I guess 2006, I can't, but those are some tough years. And that's what makes it so challenging. If we had 40 million bushels a year that we could depend on, it would be easy to make the decision that we need to expand facilities. But we live in a volatile climate, and that just isn't possible. I talked a little bit about our agronomy department, but this is another division where people have overcome unbelievable obstacles. That is just total dollar sales for agronomy. That dates from 2005 to 2016. Total dollar sales is a terrible way to compare year over year in agronomy, because just like grain, you've got devaluations, you've got difference in price, but there really isn't any good way to lump fertilizer and chemical together and compare and see how you're doing. But here's how I think we're doing. In 2009, you see a peak, and then it drops off. That drop-off does not reflect decreasing volume. That is the huge fertilizer devaluation that took place then. And so on, we moved as much fertilizer, but in dollar sales, it amounted to less. And then we start to work our way back on a trend line. And again, this year, we've experienced huge devaluations in our fertilizer market to the point that most of our fertilizer is now 35 to 50% less than it was a year ago. Generic chemical is about 25 to 30% less, but yet the trend continues up. That's market share, that's performance, that's our crop consultants on your farm making a difference and earning your trust, and that's our operations guys being there on time and doing it right. So in every case, I think we can say that the Garden City Co-op has been building for a long time. We've invested a lot to try and get ready. And in the last 3 harvests and this last growing season with so many challenges in agronomy, we answered that call and we were there for you. And so I'm proud of the employee group that did it. They couldn't have done it without the facilities, but facilities does not make a great co-op, the employees do. And so if I could have all the employees of the Garden City Co-op please stand so you can recognize their heroic efforts. So back to that slide, patience and wisdom. That reminds me of the Garden City Co-op, but mostly it reminds me of Ken Jameson. If there's 2 words that sum up Ken Jameson, it's patience and wisdom. And so I was alarmed this year while I was on a trip during fall harvest. I was out of the office for a couple of days, and I received a text from Ken. And even in the midst of his patience and wisdom, sometimes a harvest like this last one can get the best of you. Harvest is going great. Why do you ask? That was the fall harvest of 2016, and with the help of your Garden City Co-op employees, we made it through, and I couldn't be prouder. Thank you very much.